This video is brought to you by you. You are the best noble ones. Hello noble ones and welcome to the first episode of my new YouTube series Freedom of Speech is a Bitch. Wait, I said a swear word. Are they going to give me a yellow dollar sign for it? Hold on a second. That would actually be an improvement for me. Expect excessive swearing. Okay, so today I had the brilliant idea of wasting some of my precious time, to be specific 48 minutes and 17 seconds, watching the first episode of this monstrosity of a documentary on Netflix about Cleopatra. Although one of the things that we will notice during this first review of the first episode, this really isn't a documentary about Cleopatra, is it? Well, I've taken some notes and I'm going to share a few things with you, so why don't we just jump on it? Today we're going to examine a lot of things. We're going to look at the weapons and armor of the Romans, which are absolutely some of the worst I've ever seen in my career as a YouTuber. We will also be talking about some of the things that have been said and some of the actual factually incorrect historical information that has been pushed as real. And also what this guy said, which is, I mean, oh my gosh, you thought the trailer was bad. But the first thing I'd like to say, very spontaneously, out of my heart, just uncensored, raw Metatron. The leather wristbands on the Romans. Literally every Roman soldier, Roman statesman, Roman general, Roman consular toilet cleaner, every single human being who happens to be a Roman in this movie wears leather bands, which we never find in iconography. Who is the costumist? Oh, come on, Metatron, this is just a movie. Why, it's entertainment. It's a documentary. And I hate wristbands. Ancient Roman iconography? No wristbands. This movie? Wristbands everywhere. We are told at the very beginning of the documentary that Cleopatra, so her legend, has been retold for millennia, but few know the real woman and her truth. Please remember this, her truth, because I don't think that it's a random phrasing of this statement, because it will connect to what this guy said in a minute. But as you can see, as I thought, as I was watching the trailer, this is not a reimagining, this is not an alternative universe or a speculative representation, this is the real woman that many people don't know, but now, thanks to this Netflix documentary, they will. And there is also something else that you'll finally figure out thanks to this TV series, you'll see. Then we are told that she's a leader of undeniable power that no one could afford to ignore, and we are told that she's a woman who bows to no man. Statement that is then contradicted further on during the documentary when we are told that she's aligning herself with men who have considerable amounts of power. Oh, but that's nothing. Much of the fuss around this situation was the fact that Cleopatra is represented with a black actress, even though she was of Ptolemaic Greek origin. We know that that's one of the problems, and you will find links to my previous videos, of course. But we can summarize in saying that that was pretty much the center of the criticism that this documentary has received. But what I'm noticing as I'm watching this documentary is not that Cleopatra is not represented in a way that a Ptolemaic Greek would have looked. It's her entire family. This is her dad, these are her brothers, this is her sister. It's not that Cleopatra doesn't look Greek in the sense of Mediterranean, Macedonian origin. No one does. Although one thing they did get right was the usage of blue makeup, which is absolutely something the Egyptians did. Thumbs up on that. Sorry, not enough, you're not getting a thumbs up from me. Now, do you remember the lady I criticized in the first episode of my series now, that told us that Cleopatra was black no matter what scholars or books or schools say because her grandmother told her so? Well, here she tells us something very interesting. She tells us, quote, ancient Egyptians would have had a variety of different complexions. Skin color ranged from black to pale brown. Let me get this straight. When I said it on my video, I was racist. When they say it, it's okay. And also, strangely enough, no mention of the actual light-skinned individuals, aka the ruling elite at this time, the Ptolemaic, of course that's not mentioned, not to mention all the colonists of Greek origins that were actually inhabiting in certain areas of northern Egypt. No mention of that. Once again, when they say it, it's okay. When I say it, I'm racist. As we continue, we've got this lady's statement that I also have a problem with, where she says, "It seems very strange that we insist on depicting her as a wholly European, given that Cleopatra represents herself as an Egyptian." And I think this is a very dishonest statement because it's misleading. Many other times, in fact the majority of times, we see representations of Cleopatra is wearing Greek or Ptolemaic clothing. But regardless, just because she was born in Egypt, that doesn't mean that she would have looked like a native Egyptian. Very basic biology teaches us that she would have looked like her parents. He tells us, with this very nice toned music that is supposed to create the atmosphere, that what's beautiful about Cleopatra is the following: that everyone can imagine her in their own way. And then he tells us, I imagine her to have curly hair, like me, and a similar skin color. So what's beautiful about Cleopatra, according to this man, is the fact that we lack conclusive evidence that can tell us 100% that's what she looked like. That's the beauty of it. Because this way everyone can have their own personal truth about her. Well, here's the thing. First, I disagree, because I think if we did find evidence, that would be wonderful. And in fact, I think every archaeologist on the planet and historian would agree with me on that. The more evidence we have, the more we know about the past, the better we can understand the past and possibly shape a better future. Second, whenever we talk about history, and I want to throw science in there too, personal truth is trumped by factual truth. Why? Because personal truth isn't truth unless it aligns with factual truth. But regardless of what we can learn about Cleopatra in Egypt, we can learn a lot about ancient Rome. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. We are told that at this time, so when Cleopatra is alive, ancient Rome is an emerging power. Ancient Rome was not an emerging power. Ancient Rome was a fully established power by this time. Remember that Cleopatra is born in 69 BC, which means that when it comes to the actual historical context of this show's setting, so all the things we see have happened after both Punic Wars had already ended. The first Punic War, which started in 264 BC, and the second Punic War, which happened in 108 BC. Both of which Rome won. That's a fully established power, not an emerging one. Metatron, semantics, you're just nitpicking because you don't like the show. Oh yeah, absolutely, I don't like the show. Can I say that I don't like the show? Overlords? I would also like to take a moment to say a huge thank you to all of you subscribers who have been supporting my work either through direct donations or through becoming Patreons in the last few days. You have been amazing. This has been stellar support. It's very humbling for me and I wear it as a badge of honor. Now let's continue. When you look at the helmets, they look brass, which I suppose it's okay. The Romans called brass mountain copper, which is kind of cool. They had a word for it, orichalcum, which is, yes, the same word that they use in Skyrim for the orcish metal. I thought it was really cool. But would it have been brass or would it have been bronze? Which one of the two would have been more common? Well, that could be a cool, interesting topic for a dedicated video. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. Little nitpick. They look like they've been mass-produced. Now, by this time, which is clearly after the very famous Marian reforms of 107 BC, the army would have been standardized, so mass-produced, sort of off-the-shelf helmets would have been the norm. With that being said, what we are told by the source is that Montefortino helmets, as they started being mass-produced for the troops, lost quality. Before the Marian reforms, only landowners and relatively wealthy individuals could have afforded to have a helmet made for them, and so they were made really well and they would have looked really well shaped. But as we go after the Marian reforms, and now you need to issue helmets to as many people as possible, these helmets start to be put together very quickly, and I think something that would have made it look a lot more realistic would have been to show helmets that don't look exactly the same. In fact, helmets that have been roughed together quickly. We know that specifically in this period, some would have had the knob at the center actually off-center, because they were put together very quickly. Most legionaries are actually wearing a lorica hamata, which is the Latin term, once again, not period, because we think that the ancient Romans actually called it lorica gallica, because they got it from the Gauls, as I say on my video dedicated to the Celts. Still, the lorica hamata is accurate in the sense that, yes, male armor, that's what they wore, and if you see in these shots, we can see that this is not just a male shirt, but it also has double shoulders, well, those are called umeralia. Previous models wouldn't have had those, but for this period, umeralia are correct. What's not correct is the way they're wearing them, because clearly they don't know how they are supposed to be connected in the front. Also, here's another thing that we are told on this documentary. The Nile River hasn't flooded for a couple of years, which has led to horrible crops. And this wasn't Cleopatra's fault. Alright, noble ones, if you forget everything about this documentary, remember this. If it doesn't rain for a year here in America, it's not Biden's fault. What would we do without Netflix? Also see several soldiers wearing the gladius on the left. Now, generally speaking, Roman legionaries would have worn the gladius on the right, but there is an exception when it comes to iconography, and it's that of officers. So officers did tend to wear the gladius on the left instead. The general legionaries would have worn the gladius on the right because it makes it easier to draw it when you have the shield in front of you. So drawing the sword is not a problem as you get ready for combat, because you don't have to remove the shield from in front of you, whereas if the sword is on the left and you have to draw, you need to remove the shield, and that could be problematic for regular soldiers. But officers are kind of an exception to that. Now, are these all officers? Maybe it's me and I don't know. I tried to rewatch those scenes several times to be like, did they give a gladius to the left to an actual officer, or are they just giving it randomly to regular soldiers? I don't know, but I still thought it was a good idea to bring it up just as a fun fact to learn a thing or two. Maybe they got it wrong, maybe not. Also, those are the worst looking Roman scuta or shields I've ever seen in my life. Those are really bad looking shields. Also, they're wearing green. Note that. Green scarves and green tunics. This is an interesting choice because green tunics were used by some forces in ancient Rome, but generally speaking it's palace guards. Why? Because green, even though it could be produced in ancient Rome as a color for dyeing clothes, it was a more expensive one when compared to, for example, pale red or, of course, undyed tunics, which were most likely the norm, simply because a tunic, in order to be dyed green, needed to first be dyed yellow. So it was a double process, it would have made it expensive. Here, I see a bit too many soldiers having green, so I don't know if that's a specific choice because these are, I don't know, high-level palace guards. Doesn't seem like it, so I think it's a little bit of an odd choice from the costume designer. But if I'm wrong and they have a reason, more than happy to learn from them, since they're not going to teach me much else on this documentary anyways. One of the first shots that we see of Roman legionaries, and that's going to be actually a recurring equipment, if you will, is that of Roman soldiers wearing leather, what appear to be muscolata armor. I'm already kind of weirded out by that choice. Also, they look horrible, they don't fit, and they're clearly not being worn over a subarmalis, which is the modern Latin word for what could have been called imperial thorakomachus, which is a sort of padded garment that ancient Romans most likely wore underneath their armor. Secondly, lorica muscolata in both of its forms, because lorica muscolata existed in both a short version and a longer version, most likely the longer one being used only by generals and very high-level officers, also because it kind of impeded movement, whereas the short one we see used by soldiers, including soldiers that are in the Roman navy. Still, as I say, this was the most expensive type of armor that could be issued. Now hold on a minute, Metatron. How does this video even make sense? I decided to speak about Cleopatra again, and many people in the comments on my Twitter believe possibly the reason why I lost the ability to monetize on this video in the first place was because of my original Cleopatra critique. And if I'm just naive and everyone is right, including Shad, by the way, thank you so much for your support, brother. If everyone is right, and Cleopatra was indeed the reason why this whole platform got demonetized, isn't this upload going to make it in fact much harder for me to regain monetization in the first place? What is my public, official, articulated, possibly long-winded response to this question? Yes.